Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. Now before we dive in, and some of you already know, I've got another channel. It's called LG Classics and I'm using it to revive old stories that didn't get much attention back then. It's also a shorter format with stories and their updates only. If you're curious, the link is below in the description. Now let's move on with today's story. This post is from the subreddit Am I the A-hole and it's by user Whisker Rebel. Am I the a-hole for refusing to take my ex back but accepting my fiance's kids? My ex-husband, let's call him Frank, and I got married deeply in love. After a while, I found out I couldn't have children. Frank wanted kids and he told me he didn't want to leave me but also wanted to have a child with someone else. I couldn't accept that. Later, I found out he had gotten a woman from his workplace pregnant. He told me he didn't want to divorce me and still wanted to be with me, but I couldn't stay. Despite his resistance, I divorced him and he married the mother of his child. This was 2 years ago. Now I'm with someone new. Let's call him Mark. Mark is kind, understanding, and has been a great support system for me after everything with Frank. I love him deeply. He has 2 sons from his previous marriage, ages 3 and 5. They stay with him every other weekend and see him regularly during the week. He's a great dad and I admire that about him. Mark and I recently decided to get married and I'm really happy about it. But ever since Frank found out, he's been trying to contact me. Today, he showed up outside my work. He accused me of being a hypocrite, accepting Mark's kids but refusing to accept his. He said that all he ever wanted was to build a life with me and grow old together, and that I was being unfair for not accepting him under the same circumstances. Logically, I see why he thinks it's the same situation, but it doesn't feel the same. The thought of Frank and his child still hurts me, yet I don't feel the same way about Mark and his kids. Frank insists it's the same, but is it? So, am I the a-hole? First of all, OP, no, you're not the a-hole. Second of all, you are absolutely wrong. It is in no way the same situation or similar or anything like that. And logically, I can't understand why Frank would think it's the same situation. Frank cheated on you and had an affair child. You didn't even know Mark when he had his children with his ex-wife. These 2 situations have nothing in common at all. Now, I don't know what the deal is with Frank, but if you don't want him in your life or bugging you or anything like that, just file a restraining order. He went to your job. There has to be security footage or something that you can use to file that restraining order. So, no OP, you're not the a-hole, and really I would do something to just try to get away from Frank, because nothing good can come from just keeping in contact with this guy. He's clearly nuts, or some mental gymnastic idiot at a minimum. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section, and now let's check out the community comments. Description Bulky 6258 says, not the a-hole. This is definitely not the same situation. Your ex cheated on you. You don't owe him or his child anything. Your fiancé, on the other hand, had his children well before your relationship. Your ex is a cheap liar and your fiancé is not in this situation. OK Commercial 1152 says, my question is, let's say you went along with this. Was the other woman okay with you being the wife and you raising her kid? What role would she have to play in this scenario? The fact that she married him tells me that she would not have been okay being brought to your house like a servant or a distant relative while you and him raised her son like you were his parents. Also, since he works with her, how would that have played out? What if you were on board to take this woman's baby and raise it as your own? Wouldn't this cause problems with his job when she would rightfully react to that? And OP responds, his plan was his son would be with his mother while he visits him and gets him time to time just like Mark. Smiley face. That's why he thinks it's the same thing and I'm the a-hole for refusing him. And just like that, we learned that Frank was even stupider than we thought. No Ear 9899 says, not the a-hole. Frank's logic sounds a lot like gaslighting. If he had wanted to grow old with you, then he needed to abandon his requirement to have biological children of his own. You have entered into another relationship and he shows up to admonish you? He calls you a hypocrite because you are accepting of children born prior to the relationship? This is all about him. He wanted a biological child, so he made one while breaking his vows to you. Boo-hoo. Just what did he think would happen? That you would fall into his arms and beg forgiveness? That you would break up with a partner who you've committed to marry? Thank goodness you're no longer married to him. Frank is a piece of work and he is now learning about effing around and finding out. And Mac Jones says, not the a-hole. This is not even remotely the same situation. Frank cheated on you and then wanted you to be okay with that after the fact. If he truly wanted to be with you and grow old together, Frank would have discussed with you the options for having children by other methods. There's adoption and surrogacy, neither of which requires cheating on your partner. Frank can go F himself, and you should state that to him unequivocally. Well, the community agrees that OP is not the a-hole and that Frank's an idiot. Now, OP has given us 2 updates, but I've curated them both into one. So now let's move on with that to see how this story ends. Wow, I didn't expect to receive this much support. Thank you all so much. I wanted to address a few things that came up in the comments. Surgery was not an option for me. We consulted multiple doctors, and in the end, we had to accept that I wouldn't be able to have children. That time was especially difficult for me, and Frank was my biggest source of support. Adoption was also off the table because Frank didn't want it. He wanted biological children. He told me, I don't want to raise someone else's child. Surrogacy was never an option for us. The one thing Frank and I fully agreed on was that a child should have the right to know their biological parents. We both believed it would be unethical to take that away from them before they were even born. The irony of Frank suddenly caring about ethics when he cheated is not lost on me. I was the one who first suggested divorce back then, but he swore he would never leave me. He even said, it will always be just the 2 of us until the end, and I believed him. When we divorced, I blocked Frank everywhere. However, he still hears about my life because my cousin is married to his best friend. I no longer speak to my cousin because after the divorce, she defended Frank and insisted that he loved me. Unfortunately, some things just don't stay private within families. Frank and I met in high school and were together for 10 years. I think that's why he knows exactly how to get to me. After our conversation, I started doubting myself. I even felt like I was the one at fault. He really did get into my head. He told me that Mark never had to make the kind of choice he did. Mark was never put in a position where he had to pick between being with me and having biological children. He claimed that if Mark had been in his place, he would have made the same decision he did. And honestly, for a moment, that made me stop and think. That's how the manipulation started. He made me question myself, and in the end, I felt guilty. I'm so glad I wrote all of this here because it helped me see things clearly. Thank you all again for your support. Also, I talked to Mark about everything and he got very angry. He's mad that I spoke to Frank, and I think he's right to be. I've decided to apply for a position at Mark's company. It just feels like a healthier option moving forward. As for Frank's marriage, I know for a fact that he only got married due to pressure from his mother. She had already told him to divorce me and remarry as soon as she found out I couldn't have children. We never got along. She was always one of those mothers who are possessive of their sons. Some people suggested I should tell Frank's wife about all of this, but I have no interest in doing so. If they get divorced, he'll just become even more of a problem for me. It's better for everyone if he stays married. Thank you all for helping me see things from my perspective again. I feel much more certain now. Well, it'll be good for you. Let's just leave Frank in the rearview mirror so you can focus on your future with Mark. And on that note, here's wishing you both the best in the future, OP. Thanks so much for sharing and take care. And now, let's move on to the next post that also has an update. This post is from the subreddit Am I the A-hole, and it's by user TurbulentPlan3703. Am I the a-hole for grabbing lunch with an ex from high school? I, 27 male, have been married to my wife, 27 female, for about 4 years now. We've been together since we were 16 and got married at 23. Before her, I dated my ex, 27 female, when we were 13 to 15. We broke up but stayed friends for a while. However, once I started dating my wife, my ex got really cold towards her and things became awkward. Toward the end of high school, my ex confessed she still had feelings for me, even though I was already with my girlfriend, now wife, and this upset my wife a lot. It caused some tension, so I decided to cut contact with my ex for good. Fast forward to now, and I'm 27. I'm out shopping and run into my ex. We greet each other, catch up a bit, and then she asks if I want to grab lunch. I didn't think much of it, honestly, just a quick catch up with someone I haven't seen in over a decade. I told my wife I'd be back in an hour or so and went. The lunch was pretty uneventful. We just talked about life and what we've been up to over the years. She congratulated me and my wife on getting married and looking to buy a house, which felt normal. At the end of the meal, she gave me her number and suggested that we all meet up sometime. I get home, tell my wife about the lunch, and she is absolutely furious. She said it was totally inappropriate and that I shouldn't have even agreed to meet up. She claims that it's disrespectful to her, especially considering everything that's happened with my ex in the past. She wants me to delete my ex's number and block her immediately. I tried to explain that it was just a friendly, innocent lunch and that it was a long time ago when things happened with my ex. I don't have feelings for her anymore, but my wife is firm. She says if I don't block my ex, it'll feel like I don't respect her, and that's a deal breaker. I honestly don't see the big deal. It was just lunch, nothing more. I feel like I've been transparent with my wife and I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. But my wife's pretty upset and now I'm second guessing if I messed up. Am I the a-hole for going to lunch with her? Yes, OP, you are the a-hole. First of all, you didn't tell your wife you were going to lunch with the ex that used to bully her. You said, I'll be back in an hour. So at least for that, yeah, you're the a-hole. Now I guess my only question is, why do you need your ex in your life at all? Why did you have to go to lunch with her to catch up about what? Have you been wondering what's up with her? You don't need that. You bumping into her should have been all that it was, and then just going on about your day and go have lunch with your wife. So yeah, OP, major a-hole, and the fact that you're playing it down like you've been transparent with your wife, no, you weren't. You know you weren't. So stop it. And what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's check out the community comments. Top Professor 9196 says, let's put it this way. If the roles were reversed, how would you feel? Your wife has a friend who confessed his love for her and treated you cold. Then your wife would run, without letting you know first, and have lunch with that person. You knew the mess that person caused and you still feel like it's not a big deal. Putting your feelings first and setting aside your wife's feelings is selfish. DFW Punk says, you not only had a lunch date with another woman, it's an ex, and said ex was rude to your wife, and you told your wife you'd be back in an hour, so you had a chance to tell her what you would be doing and with who, but didn't, which is suspect as F, and you got her number. Dude, you're the a-hole. And Plus Interview 4208 says, yes, you're the a-hole. I find it funny you didn't mention to your ex-wife who exactly you were getting lunch with, almost as if you, on some level, knew she would be upset. But let's argue you were completely unaware that this would make your wife upset, which sets the stage for a conversation about your emotional intelligence and how oblivious you are. In your opinion, it's not a big deal. Okay, then block and delete the number. Easy. If it truly isn't a big deal, why wouldn't you just delete and block your ex? At the end of the day, it looks like it doesn't matter what anyone says, as you are only replying to comments that agree with you. You aren't looking for advice, you're looking for validation. At a minimum, whether you agree or not, your wife is hurt and disrespected and has drawn a boundary. If you are willing to risk your marriage and you are willing to disrespect and hurt your wife further over someone who doesn't matter, you don't deserve your wife and are lying to yourself about how much the attention from this ex actually matters to you. Grow up. And OP responds, I've got no issue with blocking her. I did already. The main reason I made this post was because I genuinely didn't think this all would have the effect it did on my wife, seeing as everything happened so long ago and wanted to get an outside perspective. I definitely got that. Well, the top comments in the majority of the community agreed that OP was the a-hole. So now let's check out the update to see how this story ends. Hey everyone, I wanted to come back with an update. First off, I appreciate all the different perspectives. Reading through the comments really made me reflect on how I handled things. A lot of you pointed out that I didn't tell my wife who I was with until afterward, which I now realize made things worse. I just told her I'd be home in an hour, and looking back, I understand how that felt deceptive. It didn't feel, man, it was. Even though that wasn't my intention. That night, my wife and I barely spoke. She was still upset and I was frustrated, not because I didn't care about her feelings, but because I truly didn't understand why it upset her to that degree. But after sleeping on it and reading comments, I realized the issue wasn't just lunch with my ex. It was that I made that decision without considering my wife's feelings and only told her afterward, blindsiding her. This morning, I asked my wife to talk. I apologized for not thinking about how she'd feel and for how I handled it. I admitted that while I didn't mean to be secretive, my vague "I'll be home in an hour" made it seem that way. I told her I understood why that felt like a betrayal, especially given our history with my ex. I assured her that I had deleted my ex's number as soon as she asked because, at the end of the day, her feelings matter more. I wished I had communicated with her beforehand instead of assuming it wasn't a big deal. Very stupid of me. That's when she really opened up. She told me that hearing my ex's name brought her right back to high school. She remembered how my ex was cold toward her, how she confessed feelings for me despite knowing I was in a relationship, and how my wife had spent senior year feeling like she was in an unwanted competition. She admitted she knew it was silly to get worked up over something from our teenage years, but emotions don't always work logically. They never do. I told her it wasn't silly at all. Just because something happened long ago doesn't mean that feelings tied to it disappear. I hated that I had made her feel that way. She admitted that she overreacted and apologized for lashing out. She said she never wanted to be the kind of partner who tells me who I can and can't talk to, and that if I had really wanted us to keep in touch with her, she would have tried to be okay with it. But deep down, she was relieved I chose not to. And I told her I didn't want to, not because she asked, but because I realized there was no real reason. My ex was part of my past, but my wife is my present and future. We've been just fine without my ex for the past decade, and there's no reason to change that now. After our talk today, things have started to feel somewhat normal again. I'm trying to be more mindful of how my actions affect her, and she's trying to communicate her emotions before they build up. At the end of the day, this was never just about my ex. It was about respect, understanding, and making sure we're both prioritizing each other. And now, we're in a better place than ever. Thanks again to everyone who gave advice. I really appreciate it. P.S. After things settled, I showed my wife the original post and comments. She actually laughed and was very amused at some of the creative ways some of you managed to call me the a-hole. So, thanks for that. Well, OP, I'll take your update at face value because I can't put my finger on it, but something feels off. In any case, thanks for sharing, OP. Take care. And now let's finish this video with a mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's from the user dobdob2121. You told me to treat it like a finished product. I used to work for a company that constantly but carefully innovated with its employees and technology. I had a very busy job that involved a lot of travel. The company had computers at each of its offices. Employees like me would use them to manage all of our complex jobs and travel arrangements, which were core functions of the company. One day, I was at an office and some people from IT had a small table set up with a sign asking for 5 minutes of our time to help them make our computers easier and faster for us to use. I volunteered and they had me sit at their table in front of a notebook. Each page in the notebook mimicked a redesign of the computer screens that we used. The IT testers asked me to interact with the mock-up just the way I would interact with the computer, as if I had just now walked up to it and found it like this. They wanted to see how ready their design was for employees to use without additional training. I tapped buttons on the page mock-ups and they flipped to the resultant next screens in their notebook, all while using a stopwatch and making notes. I successfully logged in and navigated the menus to the function I needed. When I tried to use the function, however, I got stuck in an endless loop trying to back out of it when I couldn't figure out how to use it. They kept flipping back and forth between two pages that each had a back button I was trying to use to get back to the menu. I stood up, grabbed my bags, and started to leave. They became quite animated and asked me to stay and complete a feedback questionnaire. I told them that I just had. If I had encountered a computer like that at work, I would just have gone to another computer, leaving my logging active and compromising corporate security on that computer because it didn't work and I didn't have time to figure out what was wrong with it and how to fix it. They said that they really needed more information in order to get it right. I said I agreed with them as I walked away. That redesign never got implemented. Well, OP, I think you gave them all the feedback they needed to actually rework the design. But what do I know? Thanks for sharing, OP. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out. So here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.